Blender is an excellent tool for making titles, and I'm going to show you how to make a cool title like this in a way that can easily be adapted to your own needs. We'll create a moving background, animate the text and the lighting, and create the exploding effect at the end. We start with a new file from the File menu and delete the default cube by pressing X and confirming. It's a good idea to save the file and then save regularly so you don't lose any work. First, we're going to set up a dark, misty background. We will render this to a movie file that we can then use as a background in the compositor. OK, switch to Cycle's render engine from the render menu. In the render panel, we'll use the HD 720 preset for the dimensions. Set end frame to 125. For the sake of maximum compatibility, change the frame rate to 30 FPS. Set output file type to AVI RAW, RGB for full quality. Note that AVI RAW files are not compressed and take up a lot of disk space. Ours will take up about 350 megabytes. If you're concerned about this, you may want to use an image format such as PNG or compromise on quality and use a compressed video format such as AVI JPEG with quality set to 90% or so. For the file destination, click the folder icon and choose a directory and file name for the rendered movie. I named mine mistbg.avi. In the sampling pane, we only need 3 render samples for the background. Clamp direct 4, indirect 3. In light paths, refractive caustics off. In post-processing, dither set to 1, sequencer off. Let's now position the camera. The quickest way is to enter the values. So select the camera in the outliner, move the mouse pointer to 3D view, press N for the properties panel and set X location to 0, Y to -12, Z to 0.3. Set rotation to X90, Y0, Z0. In the camera panel, set focal length to 24 and size to 32 if it isn't set so already. Now we'll set up the world material for the background. In the world panel, the world already has a material, so click Use Nodes. Move the mouse pointer to 3D view and press Shift F3 for the node editor window. Click the world icon on the header. Change background strength to 0.2. Press Shift A and add a Mix RGB node from the Color submenu. Then connect it to the color inlet of the background. Change the Mix node blending to Value from the pop-up menu and set Factor to 1. Set Color 1 to Hex value 05090F. Press Shift A again and add a noise texture. Connect its color output to color 2 of the value node. Set the scale value of the noise to 1.2, detail to 16, distortion to -2. Press Shift A again and add a mapping node from the Vector submenu. Then connect it to the vector inlet of the noise texture. Shift A once more to add a texture coordinate node from the Input submenu. Then connect generated to the vector inlet of the mapping node. We will now animate the background by setting keyframes for the Y location value of the mapping node. Make sure the current frame is 1 in the timeline. Hover the mouse over the mapping location Y field and press the I key on the keyboard to insert a keyframe. Move to the end frame 125 and change the mapping location Y value to 1. Hover the mouse over the field and press I again for keyframe. Now to the graph editor window. Because we need to change the movement of the world background to linear interpolation. Press A once or twice to select both keyframes if they are not selected already. Then press the period key on the numpad to zoom in on them. Now press V for the handle type menu and choose Vector. This gives us linear interpolation, so the background moves evenly without changing speed. Save your work and we are now ready to render this background. From the render menu, choose Render Animation and take a break while the movie renders. Okay, the background render is done. We can now load up the movie in the compositor. Press Shift F3 to return to the node editor window. Click the picture icon on the header for the compositor. Click Use Nodes. Make room by separating the two nodes, Render Layers and Composite Output. Press Shift A to add a movie clip node from the Input submenu. Click the Open button and navigate to the background movie just rendered. With the movie loaded, press Shift A and add an alpha over node from the Color submenu. Connect the image outputs from the movie node to the first image input of the alpha over node. That's the background done. Now we can focus on the foreground. We're going to do two things. Because the motion blur feature in the render panel is slow to render, we'll fake motion blur with a blur node here in the compositor, and we'll add a lighting glare effect as well. OK, Shift A again, add a mix node from the Color submenu. Connect the image output to the second image input of the alpha over node. Change the blend mode to Add from the pop-up menu. Set factor to 0.8. Shift A again and add a glare node from the filter submenu. Then Shift A once more for the blur node from the same submenu. Set the glare type to streaks if not set already, quality to high, iterations to 5. Color modulation can remain at 0.25. Set mix to 1. We'll animate the threshold value, causing the glare to disappear by the end of the animation. Go to frame 45 in timeline. Set threshold in the glare node to 0.9. Hover the mouse over the field, press I to insert a keyframe. Move to the end frame 125. Change the threshold to 2. Hover and press I again for keyframe. Now for the rest of this node. Set streaks to 2 and set fade to 0.98. Finally, connect the image output to the second image input of the Add node. And that's the glare done. Now the blur. We want to blur fast-moving parts horizontally, and that's at the beginning, as the text is falling in. So go to frame 1, change X blur to 14, hover over the field, press I for keyframe. Move to frame 25, change X blur to 8, hover over the field, press I for keyframe. Move to frame 30, change X blur to 0, hover mouse, I for keyframe. That sets up our fake motion blur to end on frame 30 when the text will be finished falling in. Now connect the blur image output to image input of the glare node and also connect it to the first image input of the add node. All that remains is to connect the image outputs of render layers to image inputs of blur and to connect image output of the alpha over node to image input of the composite node. And we're done with the compositing. Next, we must change render settings. Set render samples to 100 and in the film pane switch transparent on. In Output, click the folder icon and set a destination folder and file name so that we don't overwrite the background movie file. I'm just going to edit the name to tutorialmovie.avi. You may want to change to a compressed file format such as H.264 or OGG Theora. I'll continue using AVI RAW. Now for the text. Return to 3D view and press Shift-A, then add a text object. Press R to rotate, followed by X, enter 90. Press Tab for edit mode and delete the default text. We're now going to enter the title text. As we do so, we'll use a little trick to help us with animation later. We will add a space between each character and 3 spaces between words. Why we need this will become clear in a moment. So type in B space, L space, E space, N space, D space, E space and R. Now 3 spaces and I space N, 3 spaces and M space, O space, T space, I space, O space, and we close with N. Blender in motion. Okay, sounds great. Now tab back to object mode. Before moving on, set current frame to 1. We go to the text panel to adjust the options and animate the text. When you work on your own titles, you will probably want to change to another font, and there are 2 ways of doing that. You can load a font file by clicking the folder icon for the regular option in the font pane, and then navigate to the fonts on your hard drive. Here are the paths to the System Fonts folder for Windows, Mac and Linux. Another way is to use the Object Font feature. You can create or import objects that you will use as your text characters and name them like font_A, font_B, font_C and so on. If you then enter font underscore in the object font field, your font objects will be used to represent the letters in the text object. For this to work as expected, you would need to be sure the text object extrude remains at 0 and fill is set to none. That way only your font objects would appear. For the sake of compatibility, in this tutorial we'll use the default Blender font. Okay, we set extrude to 0.07 and leave the rest at default values. Next we move down to the paragraph pane, set align to center. We're now ready to animate the text. We'll use letter spacing to space out the letters and then bring them close together before slowly separating them again. The maximum value for this setting is 10, and that makes it clear why we needed those extra spaces. So set letter spacing to 10, hover the mouse over the letter field, press I to insert a keyframe. We also need to move the text object to prevent any of the letters showing at the start. In the Properties panel, enter 9.6 for the X location value. Hover the mouse over the field and press I for keyframe. To check this, press numpad 0 to look through the camera. All letters are outside the view. Move to frame 30. Then in Properties again, set X location to 0, hover the mouse over the field, press I to set the keyframe. In the text panel, change the letter spacing value to 0.68, hover the mouse, press I for keyframe. Move to frame 87, change letter spacing to 0.95, hover the mouse, press I for keyframe. That's the basic animation of the text done. Play the animation to check that all is as expected. The letters fall in, slowly separate, then stop. Great. Next, we'll create a material for this object. In Materials panel, click the New button. This is going to be a simple material, a mix of diffuse and glossy, so we'll create it directly in the panel. Change the shader from the Surface pop-up menu to Mix Shader. Set factor to 0.9. Set the first shader to Diffuse from the pop-up menu. Click the color and set it to hex value 5D99E7. Set the second shader to Glossy. Click the glossy color and set it to hex value B7DBE7. Set glossy roughness to 0.2 if it isn't already. In Settings pane of the material, multiple importance can be turned off. Next, let's set up the lights, as that will be easier to do now rather than later. Press numpad 0 to move out of camera view. Select and delete the default lamp by pressing X and confirming. Press Shift A, add a point lamp. In the lamp panel, turn on multiple importance, set size to 0.1 and strength to 1000. In Properties, set X location to -0.4, Y to 3.8, Z to -1.6. Duplicate the lamp with Shift D, then change location to X 3.8, Y 3.8, Z 1. Press Shift D to duplicate again, and move the new light to X0, Y -4, Z0. In the light panel, set size to 10 and strength to 5000. While the first two lights create highlights from the back, this one provides more diffuse lighting from the front. Duplicate with Shift D once more and set size to 0.1 and strength to 500. This last light is the one that will create most of the glare effect and will animate its position. Set current frame to 1. Set lamp location to X -5.3, Y -4, Z 0. Hover the mouse and press I for keyframe. Move to the last frame, 125. Change the light X location to 7.8. Hover and press I for keyframe. Now, if we play the animation, the light moves along with the text. Finally, the explosion. We'll create the effect by duplicating the text object, then we'll animate visibility and particles. Move to frame 87. Select the text object and press Shift-D to duplicate it. In the outliner, click the eye icon of the original text object to hide it. With the duplicate selected, go to Modifiers panel and add a Remesh modifier. Set Mode to Smooth, Octree Depth to 8, remove disconnected pieces off. Add a Subdivision Surface modifier and change View Subdivisions to 2. In the 3D view, press Alt-C and convert to Mesh. Before working on the explosion particles, let's animate visibility. With the duplicate selected and the current frame still at 87, hover the mouse over the eye icon of this object in Outliner and press the I key for keyframe. Repeat for the render icon of this object. Move to frame 1. Click the eye icon to turn visibility off. Hover, press the I key for keyframe. Again, repeat for the render icon, turn it off and record the keyframe. The visibility of the original text object should be the reverse. So, still on frame 1, click the eye icon of the original to make it visible, hover over it, press the I key on the keyboard for keyframe, and repeat for its render icon. Then move to frame 87, click the eye icon of the original to hide it, hover, press the I key for keyframe, and repeat for render, hide it and set the keyframe. If you now move to frame 86, you should see the original text object is visible and will be rendered. Moving to frame 87 again, it is the duplicate text object that is visible and will render. The original is hidden. Now, with the duplicate selected and still on frame 87, press space and enter Quick Explode. In the Particles panel, change number to 100,000. Start should already be 87, change end to 88, lifetime to 30, random to 0.2. In the velocity pane, leave normal at 1, set y to 1.5 and leave random at 1. The reason we are using the y-axis instead of z is that these two axes are swapped in particles. In Physics pane, set size to 0.01, small particles for a stardust effect. We also need to change gravity in the Scene panel. Make sure gravity is turned on and change the z value to -2. And that's the explosion set up. In 3D view, press numpad 0 for camera view, go to frame 1 and play the animation. If all is well, the letters fall in, separate again, slow down and explode into tiny pieces. Remaining on frame 1, we can make one final improvement, adjusting the motion curve interpolation of the text object in Graph Editor. In Outliner, select the original text object. In Graph Editor, click the triangle of the text object to reveal the global spacing between characters channel and click it to select it. In the View menu, choose Only Selected Curve Keyframes. select keyframes at frame 30 and 87. Press the period key on the numpad to zoom in. Select the lower keyframe, press V, and choose the free option. Now drag the handles up into a V formation, like so. This will make the text bounce apart more naturally after it collapses into the center. We're done. Press Ctrl F12 to render. Press Ctrl F11 to play the rendered movie. And there it is again, looking good. A couple of things to wrap up. For the sake of this presentation, we covered only one title of 4 seconds duration. In real use, your title sequence might be longer, featuring a number of titles. In that case, it's a good idea to completely separate the text animation and the background. In the compositor, remove the background by connecting the Add node to the composite output. In Render panel, keep the transparent option on and set the output file type to a type that contains an alpha channel, such as PNG, the RGBA option. This will render your animation as image files that can then be used as an image strip in the video sequence editor. It is in the sequencer that you would then composite the movie over the background. You would want to loop the background by repeatedly fading it over itself. In addition, you probably would want your background movie to be of a longer duration. And with that, we're all done. I hope this has been useful. Do feel free to leave a comment and subscribe for future updates.